Well, hello there. How goes it? Can y'all hear me all right? Hi. I'm waiting for it to refresh on my end so I can actually open up the stream. Oh, there it goes. Okay. We're good. We're good. So, I don't mean to make any enemies with that title, but the Game Boy Pocket does suck. Um, but not in the way you probably think. Uh, it is my opinion that the Game Boy Pocket is the best looking aesthetically. It's peak Nintendo design. Nintendo hasn't made a better looking Game Boy ever. This was they peaked here, and it's all downhill from there. That doesn't mean Game Boy Pocket doesn't have problems, and that is the point of the stream. In the interest of time, I have actually written an outline of talking points to go over for this stream. But like usual, I am pretty underprepared, and it's probably going to be a total disaster. This specific topic would likely be better in the form of a highly scripted, highly edited video, and since, let's be honest, I'm not going to put in that effort, we're getting a stream. But anyway, I am going to... I'm going to get pretty technical on power and how electricity works and power supplies, batteries, so on and so forth. And if you want to know more, if you go to my YouTube channel, go and scroll down, there's a playlist right there, Electronics 101 videos. That's been there for a few months now. I yoinked that from Shank. There's quite a few good videos in there regarding like soldering, electronics basics, voltage, resistance, watts, power, all this stuff that we're going to be covering. We'll get there, I promise. But yeah, just heads up. I will probably also be periodically throwing links into chat because this is, of course, going to be a multimedia experience. I didn't prepare as much as I should have, and there are some references in my notes to things that I wanted to share a link to, and I just don't have a link prepared. So you'll just have to pretend with me, and we'll make it up as we go. So let's go ahead and get started. Why does the Game Boy Pocket suck? Power. It comes down to power. I alluded to this during my last stream. I alluded to this in the first 3 minutes already, but it comes down to power. Let's define the specific problem. All right, I am going to use this one as an example because I think that's the most interesting. Power. So right out of the box, these things have power-related issues. And most of you probably recognize that from the fact that this thing takes AAA batteries. The original Game Boy uses 4 AA batteries. You got 4 of these suckers versus 2 of those. Now, you don't have to know much about batteries to tell me that this is going to work better than this. It is what it is. All right, Nintendo saw the great success of their original Game Boy, and they wanted to try and make it better. And by every mark, they absolutely succeeded, except for when it comes to battery life. These things suck. So, I don't know what the battery life on the original Game Boy is, but I know this is less than a quarter of it. Hello there, Tim Tipper. Hi, friend. Hello, Dan Haycock. Anyway, right out of the box, the Game Boy Pocket is basically just an original Game Boy. Nintendo took the exact same silicon that they had put in the Game Boy, and they used the technology advances of the 6 years or so and used it to make something that is considerably smaller and it has a better footprint that's more convenient for throwing in your pocket, or as my mods might say, boofing. It works out. It's good. But the problem is they took something that was designed to use these and they made it use these. I hope you understand what I'm getting at. Long story short, they did an incredible job with what they had, but they just they had to make trade-offs, and unfortunately we got this hot mess. So what is the specific problem besides battery life? All right, people have noticed over the years that trying to put my batteries away, making an awful noise. People have noticed over the years with their modded Game Boy Pockets especially that if you're playing certain games on the thing, like, I know a lot of people reference Pokemon, and that's because it is a popular game, but Pokemon in specific, if we were to look at the PCB of this thing, and I'm not going to take it apart because I don't want to go grab a Tetris cart too, but if we were to look at the PCB of this thing, you'd notice there's a chip here, a chip here, a chip here, a chip here, and then some extra circuitry over here, a big old battery right here. There's all this circuitry in here. This is a more complicated game. This just happens to use more power than a game like Tetris, which is literally just one chip on the PCB. This was designed for games like Tetris, not games like this. It does happen to work, but what I'm trying to say is games like this push an already strained design to the limit. So when you add something like a backlight and a flash cart, you just get even worse results, and it makes it even harder to work with. And so people have noticed that their modded Game Boy Pocket consoles, they'll play Pokemon on it, and then they'll find that their save is deleted. This is a common enough problem. There have been write-ups over the years. Let me go ahead and drop a link in chat here that I totally am not just pulling up and Googling right now. But seriously, this is documented. People have done write-ups. There's actually a really good one from Ben on what's going on, basically. And I'm probably going to reference that a lot in this upcoming stream. But yeah, it's a known issue. It is what it is. So I hope that defined the problem well enough, because let's talk about... Oh god, I already got ahead of myself and lost my place. So let's talk about the cause of this issue. Like I said, it's easy enough. You can tell most people, oh, the problem is that you're using 2 AAA batteries instead of 4 AA batteries, and that does make sense for most people, but there's more to it than that. It's not just that you're using 2 batteries versus 4 batteries, or smaller batteries versus bigger batteries. There's a whole slew of factors at play here. So the biggest one is that if we were to take a look at 1 AAA battery compared to 1 AA battery, let's just look at the battery capacity on these two. Notice the AAA is, focus, 750 milliamp hours. All right, AA, 1,500 milliamp hours. It is over twice as much. Well, it says right there 1,700. What does this one say? 750. Why is that different? Duracell, you fucked up. Oh, there we go. I'm just misreading. That's a user error. Never mind. Anyway, so we can take a look at the capacity of the battery and just estimate, just looking at the capacity alone, we can tell that this has less power in it than this. All right? But why? But why? like I said, multifaceted issue, lots of problems. But let's notice the size of the battery now. We've already established that this has less power than this. But what does the size have to do with that? Right? The size, if you've ever taken one of these things apart, which don't, but if you've done it, you've probably noticed that it's just long sheets of material layered together and then rolled up, right? We can think of these sheets as having surface area. Well, they do. But the more surface area these anodes and cathodes have inside this cell that are rolled up, the more power it can put out at any one time. So not only is there more power stored in here, this can put out more power than this can. And it's not even a factor of, ooh, IKEA versus Duracell. It's same thing with 2 IKEA batteries. We've got 900 milliamp hours on the AAA versus 2450 on the AA. Capacity, batteries. Let me scroll down my notes. But yeah, we can think of the Game Boy as having like a limited power envelope. And the original Game Boy design, the one that used 4 of these things, it was pretty comfortable. You had plenty of power to work with. And then Nintendo basically reinvented the wheel, gave us this, which ran off of these, and we cut out basically all of that overhead. So when you're adding something like a backlight kit and a flash cart, you're cutting into that overhead pretty significantly. It doesn't work out in a lot of cases, unfortunately. So, like I said earlier, this results in some people, they're playing Pokemon Silver, Pokemon Gold. They notice that their saves get deleted. This is actually a specific problem referenced in that article I just linked a few minutes ago from Ben. The problem is the voltage on the console itself drops from 5 volts down to less than 4, and then the battery backup circuit kicks in, and then the Game Boy starts drawing from the battery backup, and it just wipes the battery out. And because this thing uses SRAM, when the battery's gone, so too is your save. So the problem is with the design, yes? Well, kinda. Nintendo later changed up their design a little bit with the Game Boy Light and the Game Boy Color. I don't have a Game Boy Light at my desk. I'm not going to go and grab one, but it's basically a Game Boy Pocket, but in a Game Boy Color shell, in that it has 2 AA batteries instead of 2 AAA batteries. And while it's not quite the same as the original Game Boy's 4 AA batteries, it is quite a bit better, and it gives us enough of that overhead back that we get better performance when it comes to backlit consoles and flash carts. It just works better. It's enough of that overhead back. And so basically, I'm not saying that Game Boy Light and Game Boy Color don't have the same problem. It's just much less noticeable because we have better batteries powering the things. It's that overhead that we're really getting at. Don't want to spoil it. I'm trying to stick to my outline. Sorry, I keep wandering around. Okay. So on the same note, we of course don't experience any of these problems on stuff like the Game Boy Advance or the Game Boy Advance SP, because for the most part with these specific consoles, the power management circuitry is just straight up better designed. On the Game Boy Advance, we have a full digital power management circuit, whereas on the original Game Boy Pocket, this is all analog, done with discrete transistors and stuff. And don't even get me started on this. This is a brilliant design. It's dated, sure, but when you consider they made this 30 years ago and how different the technology was back then, it's mint. All right, hang on. Let me catch up on chat real quick. I glanced and saw a few comments that I think are interesting. Yeah, basically, big battery means more storage space for Magic. That's it, 100%. Yeah. Yeah, it doesn't really help that pockets lack LEDs, so you don't know when your batteries are gonna die. Yeah, you're 100% right. But I find that doesn't really make that big of a difference, because with how I use a pocket, I use it once and then recharge the batteries. It's you don't get multiple sittings out of it, in my opinion. I mean, maybe multiple times throughout the day, but at the end of the day, I'm gonna pop the batteries out and recharge them. It is what it is. And yeah, this is a pretty unique Game Boy. I have misled you in that this is not exactly a Game Boy Pocket. But, it's the same thing. It still uses a Game Boy Pocket power board. But anyway, turn that off. Is there a battery mod widely available for the Pocket? Well, yes, but I'm not sure I recommend it. I haven't tried it, and to be honest, I'm not going to try it, but there are some people that make battery mods. I will elaborate more on what I recommend for batteries in the future, but I'm getting to that. That's going to be part of this video. But on battery mods specifically, I don't recommend them. Yeah, go figure. I could have read the next few comments. You guys are already discussing it. Anyway. Yeah, no. We do not do LiPo mods with TP4056 modules. Well, trust me, I have a video coming up on that. I have a whole slew of these battery mods that have been sitting on my desk, taking up space, waiting for a video on this. I promise you I'm getting there. This is actually the prerequisite for that video. We're not going to get into that today, but trust me, that is coming. We will talk about it. Don't do TP4056 mods. I will not quickly explain. You'll just have to catch the next video, or try and glean that information from this one and come to your own conclusions. It is what I only have so much time, my dude. This is already we're 20 minutes into the stream, and I plan to get through the first half of the video, or the first half of my outline, in 10 minutes. Anyway, sorry. Rambling. Continuing. So, I was just discussing the problem, short battery life, deleting your saves. There's another problem that I have explored in some of my backlight videos, specifically when I did the video for this console, which has the Funny Playing Q5 IPS kit in it. And yes, this is an actual Game Boy Pocket. This isn't the same shenanigans as this one. But we explained in that video, and I did some experimentation with the nickel metal hydride rechargeables and with a flash cart. I was using the EverDrive specifically, I believe. One of these bad boys. Why don't I pop that in there, actually? And this has some joogies in there, so it's going to work fine. But oh, there it is. Did you see how I just turned it on and it reset? Yeah, that is a common problem with these things too. This should work fine. I should be able to boot into a game, because I have some pretty decent quality batteries in here. If I were to pop these especially in there, I don't think I'd be able to boot into the game. In fact, let's try it. Let's have some practical examples instead of just me whining about stuff that I can't show you. Helps if the batteries are charged, huh? If those ones aren't charged, I sincerely doubt these are. Oh, what do you know? Never mind. I was mistaken. But there you see it. I'm not hitting power. I'm not hitting reset. You saw it reset just now. You see it resetting again. This is a problem with Game Boy Pockets. This is why they suck. Right? This is why the title of my stream is as it is. You can't just put batteries in the damn thing and play it. It doesn't work. We can mitigate this issue by lowering the brightness, but in this particular case, I have it taped off because I don't want to adjust it. I use this particular Game Boy for battery testing, and I want that to be consistent. Had I used a different backlight kit, I wouldn't have had to tape that off. I could just set it to the same level every time, but because of how Funny Playing works, etc., not going to get into that too much. Anyway, carrying on. So, what is the fix? Okay, there are several different fixes. The most effective fix, in that everything else is really a band-aid that you slap on that won't actually solve the problem, but it will make your console work. But the most effective fix is replacing this power supply right here. Now, like I alluded to earlier in this stream, this is a purely analog design. It is quite archaic as far as excuse me, sorry. It is quite archaic as far as power supply designs go. If you were to commission a power supply design, you would get something that looks a whole heck of a lot more like this than it looks than that. Even this is pretty archaic as far as modern stuff goes, but it's closer than this is. Anyway, this is an older design. It is less efficient than current stuff, and it is designed with certain properties in mind. One of those properties is powering the screen. This power supply is designed to output a multitude of voltages. I forget which specifically. I think it's like a negative 19 volt rail for the LCD and then a 5 volt rail for the Game Boy itself. Well, once you pop out the original LCD and drop in an IPS kit, you're no longer using that negative 19 volt rail. All right, you're wasting efficiency on that rail. So yeah, a solution to this problem would be a better designed circuit. This circuit was designed exclusively for use with alkaline batteries, brand new AA alkaline, AAA, excuse me, alkaline batteries. Nickel metal hydride batteries are close enough that they often work, but like I just showed you, we had problems. Those problems exist on stock Game Boys, but they're definitely exacerbated with flash carts and backlight kits. But like I said, a new design for this, a whole replacement for this DC-DC board right here in the lower left corner. You know, every single Game Boy Pocket has one of these things. Some of them are even different designs, like these two. Even though the one on the right technically isn't a Game Boy Pocket, that is still Game Boy Pocket power regulator. But yeah, a newly designed one of those things would work out. This is actually a problem that I set out solving. I didn't get very far because of who I am as a person, but I did make my own design, and I never actually built the circuits and put them together. I know my board will work, but it's untested. I don't know how well it will work. Power supply design is an art. It is It is a very highly technical skill that I do not possess, and I just simply don't know if my design will work. Well, rather, I don't know how well it will work. I know it will work, but there's more to it than just providing power. You've got to account for how much power you're going to need. You got to account for efficiency. You got to account for ripple, capacitance. Uh, I don't want to get into it, but needless to say, it is very difficult to do right, and this is as close as we've gotten in about 30 years to doing it right. There are other designs that just so happen to come out extremely recently, like past few weeks, from at least two different vendors. Um, I might be testing one of them. I will not be testing the other because I don't want to give that person any more undue attention. Um, if you don't know who I'm talking about, congratulations. If you do, don't mention it, please. We're not going to have that discussion. Um, but anyway, an initial analysis of those designs without actually plugging them in and testing them. One of them looks like it's going to have some massive inrush current problems, which might cause some particular issues with lower spec batteries. Higher spec batteries, like these or these, will probably work a lot better, but I know not everyone has those, and some of you guys are still using stuff like this, and you're going to have problems. So take caution. It might be fine. I could be talking shit for no reason. But needless to say, I haven't tested those designs, but it doesn't look right to me. It gives me reason for pause. And from what I know about power supply design, from trying to make my own design, I know it is a very difficult thing to get right, and I don't think that how it was done was the right way. Moving on. So this actually invalidates part of my outline because, like I said, those things just came out, and I literally have in my outline that I have seen plenty of other designs, and they're all basically vaporware, including my own. But then two of them just came out, so I'm just gonna go ahead and skip this section. Yeah, that could be the solution, replacing the power supply design, but that's not to say that you don't. I literally said don't mention it, dude. That's a good way to get yourself muted. Anyway, I don't want to give this hack any more attention, so let's move on. Anyway, power supply isn't the only solution. You still need to use good batteries, right? You can't just pop on down to the dollar store, get yourself some Thunderbolt Magnums and send it, boy. It doesn't work that way. You get what you pay for when it comes to batteries. I could literally put these on a scale and weigh these, and these weigh more than this whole stack. That's not for no reason. These things are absolute garbage. Do not buy heavy duty dollar store batteries. All right? Just anyway. Still need good batteries. So let's talk about specific batteries. All right? Like I said, don't buy the dollar store batteries. You get what you pay for. If you want to use alkaline batteries, that's fine. That's what it's designed for. That's literally what this console is designed for. Those will work just fine in most cases. Just keep in mind that alkaline batteries are not rechargeable. So whatever life you get out of the batteries, that's it. Once they're dead, you got to buy more batteries. You got to move on. Stick to... Well, let me get my alkaline battery drawer. Stick to big brands. Energizer, Duracell, so on. They make perfectly good alkalines. You won't have any problems with those. I have these Ever Ready Golds that I have used in pockets I bought them because they were on clearance. That's literally the only reason. They're fine, but don't look at that. More Thunderbolt Magnums. Don't use these things. They're garbage. I don't know if they make these in AAA. I'm pretty sure they do. If they do, these will be literally the best batteries you can use in your Game Boy Pocket, bar none. Even better than any battery mod you could possibly put in. You will get reliability and runtime out of these that you can't get out of any other battery. The downside, of course, is that these are not rechargeable, and they are like 4 times the cost of like the regular Duracell alkalines. So they work. If runtime is the only thing you're after, Energizer Lithium Ultimate Lithium batteries. These are the bee's knees right here. Anyway, like I said, got another video coming on that stuff. So if you want to use rechargeable batteries, unfortunately, this is a case where this is one of the few cases where I will not recommend nickel metal hydride batteries. They are unfortunately just not up to the task. They're good for other Game Boys, not for the Pocket. Don't use nickel metal hydride. It's not to say you can't use rechargeable batteries, because these things are actually excellent with Game Boy Pockets. I use, well, specifically I have some 10 volts in this thing, but I have right here Juki batteries. Big Clive did a pretty good video on these things. Specifically, it was the AA version and not the AAA version, which didn't exist at the time of his video. But these ones in particular are engineering samples, and they work great. That's not to say they aren't without problems. I haven't actually gotten my hands on the ones that just came out. They literally just came out like within the last few weeks. I don't know where to get them aside from Retro Game Repair Shop. I know they have some of them. Let me... I'm going to show it real quick. So, just dropped a link in the chat. That's for these. Well, not explicitly these, because these are engineering samples. But what these are basically a lithium ion cell, like one of these things. Try not to throw them around. One of these things literally crammed into the form factor of a AAA battery with a little voltage regulator on the end there that converts it from the 3.7 volts to the 1.5 volts that is expected out of AAA batteries. One side effect, I guess, of how these work, which actually works out in our benefit quite significantly, is that throughout the whole life of the battery, up until the very end when it's very nearly depleted, it puts out a solid 1.5 volts, and Game Boy Pocket like that kind of voltage. Throughout the vast majority of the life of these things, the Game Boy Pocket is receiving 3 volts, whereas throughout the vast majority of the life of these things, the Game Boy Pocket is receiving 2 volts. TLDR, higher voltage, better. Ooh, I need to bring my outline back. I haven't found the link. So yeah, by far, I think Jugis are the best option you can get. Failing that, if you don't want to pay for the Jugis, which I get, they're kind of expensive, but genuinely, they are the best option for a Pocket. There are also 10 volts batteries. These work, but they're based off of an older technology, and they're less than ideal. One thing that the Jugi has that the 10 volts don't have is when these are about to die, they lower the voltage, and if you have a power LED on your pocket, you will notice your power LED dimming, and that will indicate to you that your batteries are about to die. 10 volts don't do that. Jugies also have a low voltage cutoff and a charge voltage cutoff that is not exactly at the same level, whereas 10 volt, it's exactly at 3 volts or 3.2 volts or whatever it is. The battery shuts off, and then as soon as it's allowed to recover, because you know how it is, we've all done this. We've played our Game Boy till the batteries died, and it shuts off, and then you wait 15 minutes and you can get another 5 minutes out of it. You can do that with these. The problem with doing that is with rechargeable batteries, especially lithium ion batteries, especially with lithium ion batteries, that means you are going to be over discharging the cell. That can be dangerous. So yes, the Jugies are better, if nothing else, just for the low voltage detection. But 10 volts are also a good option. You can grab these on Amazon. These are much more established, but Jugies are a better option. Failing that, again, Energizer lithiums. Failing that, regular alkaline batteries. And then the worst possible option for a pocket specifically would be nickel metal hydrides. I swear, every other Game Boy, they're the best option. For the pocket, I'm sorry, they suck. It is what it is. Anyway, that is the problem. If you want to know why, I'm going to explain it in more detail. Feel free to stick around. I am going to take a quick break and catch up on chat. Get a little tea in me. But yeah, any questions? Alpha, it's not a specific brand that's better than others. It's a property of how nickel metal hydride batteries work and how the power delivery circuitry in the Game Boy Pocket is designed that just makes them incompatible. It doesn't matter if you have the best nickel metal hydrides on the market or generic ones that have seen better days. It's not going to work well with either of them. That being said, I have not specifically tested. What did you mention? Was it Eneloop Pros? Yeah, I haven't specifically tested those, but my understanding is they're pretty similarly spec'd to the Ladas. The Ladas don't work too well, and I suspect those don't either. My dude, Pokerus, just drop it. Seriously. Alright, so that was the first 5 minutes of the video. Let's get into the second half, the remaining hour. And let's talk about why the batteries matter. Let me see if I can explain why the batteries matter, instead of just saying, buy these are the best, don't buy these suck. Let's discuss why that is. So, it's going to come down to, and I've referred to this previously in other videos. I did a video a little while back on the Game Boy Advance battery mods. I actually went into this quite in depth there because of a specific problem that someone mentioned on their listing. It comes down to the relationship between volts, amps, and watts. Oh, real quick. The battery chargers for these batteries, you don't charge them in the Game Boy. They go in a separate charger and charge them that way. They don't actually sell a charger that looks like this. Their charger's going to look a little bit more like this, but those charge outside the Game Boy. There's no solution that I endorse that charges within the Game Boy. Anyway, distracted. Why this matters is because of the relationship between volts, amps, and watts. And that, it gets complicated from here. So let's start by explaining something seemingly totally unrelated. Let's talk about ohms. Ohms is the measurement of resistance in a circuit. It doesn't matter too significantly in terms of a Game Boy because the distances, the size of your circuit is small enough that resistance is largely negligible, and so you don't really have to account for it. But for the most part, keep in mind that resistance exists. We do not live in an ideal world where there's either no resistance or infinite resistance. You know, when you're measuring something, you're beeping something out with your multimeter and it's reading 0, it's not actually 0, it's just close enough to 0 that your multimeter cannot determine the specific value. Same thing, like if I were to measure the circuit of this battery, I would measure basically an open circuit or near infinite ohms, even though that's technically not measurable, at least not with my multimeter. But keep in mind that there are certain circumstances where the physical distance between these two terminals does not matter. It does not matter how high the resistance is between these two terminals because we can still bridge that gap in some circumstances. Now, again, it does not matter at all in the slightest for Game Boy Pockets, but yeah. Anyway, that's ohms. It's important, but we'll circle back to it. Volts. Volts is the voltage of something. You can determine the voltage of something. Oh, sorry. Let me start over. Voltage is basically the difference in potential values between 2 points in a circuit. So a common implementation of voltage, I guess, would be, let's look at a battery. If we were to put this in a circuit, we can measure on this side, we would measure the ground, or 0 volts. And then if we were to measure this side, we would measure the positive voltage, or 1.5 volts. That's all it is. We're quantifying electrons for the most part. We'll get more into that later. It's important to keep in mind. But in the case of a digital device, like Game Boy Pocket, the CPU itself thinks in terms of 0 and 1. 0 is going to be 0 volts, or ground, and 1 is going to be 5 volts, which is the level of voltage that this thing's pumping out. How convenient, right? Anyway, forgive me, I am trying to zoom through this. I have pages and pages of notes, but don't want to dwell on it too much. Like I said, I have that playlist. I'm gonna pull it up again on my channel. You scroll down right at the bottom, Electronics 101. Anyway, it's important to keep in mind that voltage is pushed into a circuit. So if I were to take 2 of these batteries, throw them in series, I will get 3 volts. That 3 volts is fed into this mechanism and then converted to whatever voltages it needs. Good Lord. Thank you, Mike. Yeah, it's more complicated than that, but I think that's all we need to get to the point I want to make. Let's talk about amps. All right. Amps is the amount of electric charge flowing between 2 points in a circuit. So if you guys have ever tried studying electricity, you probably run into water analogies quite frequently. And for the most part, that does work. Water makes a good analogy for electricity because a lot of us can just fundamentally picture a simple circuitry in terms of flowing water. And that's great. It does work. There are some circumstances where the analogy breaks down, and honestly, I really like it, but I'm a little bit hungry right now, so I'm going to use, instead of water, I'm going to use a milkshake. So amps refers to the amount of deliciousness inside your milkshake. A small milkshake, 12 ounces, a large milkshake, 32 ounces. The more, well, not specifically the amount of milkshake within your drink, but the amount of drink that we're going to go Oreo milkshake. Every time you take a sip of it or a bite, depending on the thickness, amps is the amount of milkshake that you're consuming. You take a bigger bite, that's more amps. I think that makes sense. The more amps you can measure in a circuit, basically the more work that circuit is doing. Now, work is a very generic term, because in the case of, if I were to take my tweezers and just bridge both these terminals, obviously this battery would be doing a lot of work, but from my perspective, all it would be doing is burning itself out. That's amps, which tangentially leads us to ampacity, which is literally a portmanteau of the word ampere and the word capacity. Combine them, you get ampacity. And what that means is that is the current carrying capacity that a circuit may possess. So, for example, I think we'll pull out my various lengths of assorted wire drawer, and let's talk about wire. Wire has ampacity. The thicker the wire, notice how nice and thin that bad boy is compared to this nice thick wire. The thicker the wire, the more ampacity it has, the more ability to carry current. If that doesn't make sense, think about it this way. Would you make an extension cord out of this wire, plug that into mains, and then try plugging your computer into that? No, you probably wouldn't do that. You probably don't know why specifically it doesn't work, but you probably already know that that won't work. That's ampacity. Now you know. That's important too. We'll get back to that. But it comes down to basically the amount of copper in something. The more copper or solder or anything else that can conduct electricity, the more material there is to work with, the more ampacity or the more current carrying capacity that thing has. My tweezers have pretty high ampacity compared to that thin wire, because look at how thick they are. And tangentially related to that, this actually isn't in my outline, but I want to talk about it anyway, because screw you. Wire gauge. A 30 gauge wire, and don't even get me started on how they measure gauge, we'll just move on and not discuss that. A 30 gauge wire, we can look at solid core wire and stranded core wire. They make 30 gauge stranded and they make 30 gauge solid core. The actual diameter of the wire, the thickness of 30 gauge wire, is always going to be the same regardless of whether it's stranded core or solid core. But you have to consider with stranded core wire, because you have loose strands, laying on top of each other, if you were to look down the middle, you see there's a little air gap between those strands, isn't there? Well, that is one of the downsides of using stranded wire over solid core when you need to carry a high amount of current. There is just simply less material through which you can put electricity. Air does conduct electricity to a degree, but you probably aren't doing that in something like a Game Boy. If you'll excuse me for just 2 minutes, I need to use the restroom. I will be right back. I'm sorry, I thought I went before the stream. Too much tea! Alright, sorry, I'm back. Wasn't even 2 minutes. Look at that. That's what I get for chugging my tea before the stream. Okay, where were we? Just talking about ampacity. So, back to amps. No power circuit. I'm not going to wash my hands. I'm going to touch all the stuff on my desk without washing my hands. Oh, please. Anyway, no power circuitry is ever 100% efficient. And the Game Boy is especially true in that regard, that it's not 100%. Good Lord, I'm sorry. Yes, if you understood that, that is still true. That was just a piss poor way to word that. No circuit is 100% efficient. So when you're doing something electronic, a lot of that inefficiency is bled off in the form of waste heat. So, for example, let's say you are charging a battery with a TP4056 board, as you are wont to do with your battery mod, right? You're putting 1 amp into this circuit. The battery is getting, let's say, half an amp or so. What's that other half amp doing? Because you're putting a whole amp in there. Well, that other half amp is being converted to heat. Now, I don't know specifically what the numbers are. I haven't actually measured it, but I know that these things will draw up to an amp, especially in their stock configuration, and I know that they put out a lot of heat, which is one of the reasons why these battery mods are such a stupid idea. You do not want to put that much heat directly into a lithium-ion battery, and yet, here we are. Forgive me, it was my younger years when I made that. Anyway, heat. Heat is a problem, especially because of inefficiency. It is also worth noting, fun fact if you will, the hotter something is, the less ampacity it has, which can actually lead to a feedback loop. If something is getting hot because you're putting too much current into it, the hotter it gets, the lower ampacity it has, which in turn makes it get even hotter, and because it's getting hotter, it's losing ampacity. You know, it's a feedback loop. That is one of the reasons why lithium-ion batteries can be dangerous, because they are subject to feedback loops. They can explode. But that is also the reason why batteries, something like a Tesla, you might have heard that they have heaters inside the battery pack. That's not specifically for people like me who live in a warm climate, but for other people that live, you know, in northern latitudes where it gets below freezing. The battery just needs to be a certain temperature to work properly. Colder, usually, you know, you get more capacity out of a circuit that's colder, but batteries can be a little bit fussy. There is a good temperature zone that they work in. Anyway, not so relevant, so I'm gonna stop talking about that, and we're gonna move on. So amps are pulled into a circuit as opposed to volts, which are pushed into a circuit. So what I mean is, if you were to feed a Game Boy a 12 volt 1 amp supply, the Game Boy is going to see that 12 volts and it's just going to explode. The 1 amp doesn't matter. 12 volts, that's the end of it. It's just not going to, well, I don't know if 12 volts is enough to kill it, but you feed 12 volts into something that is expecting 3, and more often than not, you get the magic smoke. That's unfortunately just how it is. That volts are pushed. Whenever you're trying to mix and match power supplies or batteries with electronics that you don't have the original power supply or battery, you always want to get the voltage as close as possible, if not exact, because putting the wrong voltage into something will destroy it. Amps, on the other hand, are pulled. So what that means is if I have a power supply capable of delivering up to 1 amp, but my Game Boy only needs, I don't know, quarter of an amp, then the Game Boy is only going to draw quarter of an amp, as long as the voltage is correct. So we're a little bit more flexible when it comes to amperage than in voltage. So on that note, if you're ever trying to match a power supply for something, get the voltage right and then exceed or match the amperage. Exceeding is fine, but it has to at least match. But the voltage has to be spot on every single time. Otherwise, you're going to have problems. Okay, so now that you guys have a complete and perfect understanding of volts, amps, and ohms, let's talk about watts. Because watts, that's where it gets interesting, all right? Wattage is calculated by taking the voltage and multiplying it by the amperage. That's all. It's literally that simple. If we have a 5-volt circuit drawing 2 amps, that's going to be a 10-watt draw. Easy peasy. Are you trying to say I'm buffering? Okay, hang on. Let me catch up on chat. I see some stuff going on I'm not sure I like. Oh, don't even get me started on bridging fuses. Don't ever bridge a fuse. Holy crap, bridging a fuse is so stupid. Alright, fuses are safety devices, guys. If the fuse blew, it's because something was wrong. Fix the problem, replace the fuse. If you bridge the fuse and you still have a problem, you're going to blow up your CPU, and then you're gonna not have a Game Boy. Come on, don't bridge fuses. Yes, in most cases the fuse will blow before you introduce permanent damage to the thing. But keep in mind, the fuses, the ones that are not user replaceable, quote unquote, the ones that are soldered to the board, those are there for safety reasons. They're there to prevent your Game Boy from exploding and melting down and shoving molten plastic in the far reaches of your home and burning it down. They're not there to prevent damage to your Game Boy. Yes, they do that more often than not, but that is not the purpose. Anyway, moving on. Wattage. Voltage times amps. It's that simple. It's real easy math. The only time where it ever gets complicated is when you're converting between milliamps and amps, because sometimes units can be difficult. I totally understand. That was one of my biggest struggles in high school. And to be honest, I still struggle with it now. I will often pull up a online calculator that is already using the values I'm trying to convert, just to double check between, oh, did I need 100 nanofarad or 100 picofarad? Yeah, anyway. Units can be difficult, but watts is voltage times amps. That's it. It's simple. Why do we like watts as far as a power measurement goes, a power unit? Why do we like watts? Because it is more information. It is enough information to measure the amount of work that a circuit is doing. Amps doesn't give you that information. If I say my phone charger is pulling 2 amps, you can probably assume that that's at 5 volts. If I say my dryer is pulling 2 amps, you can probably assume that's at 240 volts. All right? 5 times 2, that's 10 watts. 240 times 2 is 480 watts. That is a very different value in terms of power. So that is why we like to use watts instead of amps. Why do manufacturers still use amps? Because it's more specific to electronics. Watts is the better measurement, but it's not always the appropriate unit for measurement. We'll touch more on that in a moment, though. Let's move on. Here is a long section that I'm going to compress down to a few sentences. So why do we want to use 5 volts? Or why did Nintendo use 5 volts? For the most part, it just comes down to how the technology worked. And at the time when this was made, most technology was made using 5-volt circuitry. And Nintendo, if you know anything about them, you know that they've always gone with the cheap and reliable method instead of the bleeding edge hardware that other companies might put out. For example, the Nintendo Switch versus the PlayStation 5. Obviously, the PlayStation 5 is the more powerful console. Does that mean it's the better selling console? I have no idea. I didn't look up the numbers, but I know the Switch is doing pretty darn well. So, point being, yeah, there's more to it than that. But let's just go with that. I don't want to dwell too long on that. I can answer more questions if you guys have them. But we're gonna move on to capacity. Now, you guys probably already have a pretty darn good idea of what capacity is. But to bring it back to my milkshake analogy, the larger the milkshake, the more capacity it has, and your milkshake is power. The more milkshake you have, the more boys you have in the no, the more hours you get out of your batteries. But capacity is measured in amp hours or watt hours. Notice the hours portion of capacity. We're not talking about amps, we're talking about amp hours. We're not talking about watts, we're talking about watt hours. It is an important distinction because saying my battery has 1 amp makes no sense. Saying my battery has 1 amp hour, perfect sense. So what does that mean? Let's take a hypothetical AA battery. We'll say this one because this one doesn't have its capacity written on it anymore. Let's take this hypothetical battery and assume it is a regular alkaline battery with a nominal voltage of 1.5 volts and 2,000 milliamp hours. And for those keeping track at home, 2,000 milliamp hours is 2 amp hours, because milli is just 1,000. This 2 amp hour battery at 1.5 volts, because it has 2 amp hours, it can power a 2 amp circuit for 1 hour. That's all that means. Now, of course, that is assuming that the circuit takes the same voltage. If you have to do any conversion, you have to account for conversion inefficiencies and so on and so forth. But we're going to ignore all that just for the sake of the example because it just makes the math more difficult, but the concept is the exact same. So my 2 amp hour battery will power a circuit that requires 2 amps of power for 1 hour before being depleted. My 2 amp hour battery can also power a circuit that requires only 1 amp of power, and then it will last 2 hours. Or it can power a circuit that requires 4 amps of power, but it'll only last half an hour. That's all it is. It's a simple ratio of capacity over time. Now, we use amp hours for batteries in most cases instead of watt hours because it makes the conversion a little bit more clear. Wattage would be something that you measure the entire circuit with. But if we look closely at this circuit, we might notice quite a few different voltages. If we take this specific unit, we know 3 volts goes in, gets converted to 5 volts for the system. The screen takes 5 volts, converts that to a multitude of other voltages like 3.3, 1.8, so on and so forth. Wattage makes sense when we're looking at the entire end product, but when we're looking at one specific circuit, amps is a little bit easier to understand. Which, I guess, while we're at it, let's talk about C rating for batteries. Now, C rating isn't a specific value. If I say I have a 1C battery, that refers to the capacity and the amount of current it can move at any one time. So my 2 amp hour battery, assuming it is a 1C battery, that means my 2 amp hour battery can put out a maximum of 2 amps. Or if it's rechargeable, it can charge at a maximum of 2 amps, so on and so forth. A 2C battery at 2 amp hours would be able to put out 4 amps. That's all it is. It's just a ratio. It's nothing too complicated. If you've ever dabbled with hobby RCs, you've probably seen that more times than you'd like to admit. It is not a new thing, but it is becoming more popular as we start to explore higher and higher power draws placed on batteries. You know, back in my day, you know, you just plugged in your nickel cadmium rechargeable battery packs and you just went to town with your Radio Shack piece of junk RC. But nowadays, you know, we have these 2S LiPo batteries and they're drawing literally hundreds of amps. So you need to pay attention to the C rating on batteries, else, you know, they explode. So yes, that's I think an interesting bit of information, but not too relevant to our discussion. So let us move on once again. Batteries can only put out a certain amount of watts. It doesn't matter how high the voltage is. There is a limit to how much power it can put out. That is the C rating. All right. If you exceed that, sometimes you get explosions. Sometimes the battery just fails. Sometimes it, you know, you get a spicy pillow, so on and so forth. Not too important. Just know that you can't exceed that. Let's also talk about why that is. So I have been saying over and over during the stream that AA's are bigger than AAA's. I don't think that that is any mystery to any of us here. I think we can all accept that based off of the observation that we can all make and probably have all made with these batteries. This is bigger than this one. Why am I saying that? Because earlier I mentioned that these things have, these are just layers of material all rolled up and compressed. There is more surface area, which means this battery can put out more power than this one. And I'm not just talking, you know, amp hours. I'm not saying this one can last 2.5 times as long as this one. I'm also talking about C rating. This thing can put out proportionally more power than this thing can. This has a lower limit of power it can put out. I don't know the specifics because I don't have data sheets for either of these batteries, but I'm going to throw out a completely arbitrary number just as an example. Let's say this 900 milliamp hour battery, let's say these are 1C. I think they're a little bit more than that, but let's say they're 1C. This thing can put out less than an amp. This thing, probably also 1C, probably actually more because, like I said, it has better surface area on account of it having more material on side of it. Even at 1C, it can put out almost 2.5 amps. Size matters. What the hell did I just read? Oh, I see. Just spam. Okay, anyway. That was the fun part of the video. I like talking battery capacity because it's very simple and yet people still constantly mess it up. I went on a very, very big rant probably 8 months ago at this point, maybe even longer, about how someone in the community who apparently has very highly rated credentials according to them. I haven't actually looked it up, and I personally don't care. How they keep mistaking watts for watt hours and saying how their battery has a capacity of 6 watts, which makes 0 sense because batteries don't have capacity in watts, they have capacity in watt hours. You cannot compare capacity without using units of capacity. Anyway, let us talk nominal voltage. You've probably heard the term before, but let's discuss it. Nominal voltage is, for the most part, the average voltage of the battery. Every single battery that we would use in a Game Boy Pocket, I'm sure there are some exceptions, but I don't know of any offhand. Every single battery has a voltage curve. That is to say, when the battery is full, the charge is full, there's been no depletion of the cell, it has the most amount of power in it, it has the highest voltage. When the battery is depleted, there's no more charge, you've used up all the power you can possibly use. The voltage is also depleted. There is a curve, something like this. All right, I'm going to go ahead and throw a link to datasheet in the chat of a popular alkaline battery. If you pull that up, one of the first things you'll see besides physical dimensions of the battery, you will see voltage curves of the battery. You will see that at the beginning of the life of the battery it has a higher voltage, and at the end of the usable life of the battery it has a lower voltage. That is called a voltage curve. For the most part, most batteries look pretty much the same. It starts high, goes pretty flat for a while, and then it goes down. Oh, well, thank you. Thank you, Papa. I appreciate it. Totally throwing me off. I'm very distracted now, but thank you. Voltage curves. Alkaline batteries have a voltage curve. Lithium-ion batteries have a voltage curve. Nickel metal hydride batteries have a voltage curve. And that's where Joogies get special, because they don't have a voltage curve. So I'm going to throw a couple more data sheets in the chat here, because data's cool. There is a lithium-ion. There is nickel metal hydride. The point I'm trying to make by talking about nominal voltage and voltage curves is that the average voltage a nickel metal hydride puts out is about 1.2 volts, hence the nominal voltage of 1.2. The average voltage an alkaline puts out is 1.5 volts, hence that nominal voltage, but I don't think it actually says on here. Oh yeah, there it is, right there. 1.5 volts. Whereas the nominal voltage a lithium-ion cell puts out is 3.7 volts. Totally forgot where I was going with this, but oh yeah, no, never mind. I got it. We're good. So the reason I'm talking about nominal voltage is because I want to bring back that whole watts versus amps discussion. So you tell me, which battery has more capacity? My nominal 1.2 volt nickel metal hydride battery with 2,450 milliamp hours, or my nominal 3.7 volt lithium ion battery with 950 milliamp hours. If you remember that formula from earlier, we can calculate 1.2 times what I say, 2450. We are in amps, not milliamps, so we need to divide it by 1,000, 2.45. We can see that this battery has a effective capacity of 2.94 watt hours. This one, on the other hand, 3.7 volts times 0.95, because we're doing 950 divided by 1,000, because we are working in amps, not milliamps, even though that is rated in milliamps. 3.5. Interesting, isn't it? So, quite a bit thinner, quite a bit wider. Ooh, throwing that around everywhere. About the same length. This has slightly more capacity than one of these. But most Game Boys use 2 of these. So we're going to have to double that. 5.88. Huh? See what I'm getting at? Math. So yeah, again, there's this whole outline that I wrote up, and I'm just trying to skip mostly through it because the stream's already been going for 75 minutes, and I planned this to be about 20 minutes to half an hour worth of content. I knew it would take longer. I knew it would take twice as long, so that's why I decided to skip through most of it. Anyway, I hope that makes sense. I hope that kind of explains Jugi. Oh, you know what? I didn't even tie that all together. So we talked about voltage curves. We talked about nominal voltage, how the average voltage of something might be a little bit lower. The reason why Jugis in particular, or those 10-volt batteries, the reason why these in particular are so good in something like a Game Boy Pocket is because the voltage curve on them is literally a horizontal line. There is no curve. It's literally 1.5 volts for the life of the battery. That is ideal for the Game Boy Pocket because, like I mentioned earlier, or maybe not, I don't remember if I skipped this part, but voltage conversion is not a free operation. If you're changing voltage, it takes power to do that. The more you have to change the voltage, the more you have to stretch it out, the more power that takes. It takes more energy to convert 2 volts to 5 volts than it does to convert 3 volts to 5 volts. That's just how it works. So these, putting out 3 volts for the whole length of the life of the battery, puts much less stress on this little converter than these things putting out 2.4 volts for the majority of their life. That 0.6 volts does make a difference. As I showed you earlier, when I was trying to boot that flash cart off of these nickel metal hydride batteries, it wasn't working. It was boot looping. That's because of the lower voltage. Now, again, in an unmodified Game Boy Pocket, you can probably get away with using these and a flash cart. But every single change you make to the spec makes that power envelope even more stressed out. The Game Boy Pocket has a much smaller power envelope than any other Game Boy, bar none. All right? We have a circuitry designed for 4 AA's running off of 2 AA's. So when you go out of spec by using lower voltage batteries, when you go out of spec by using a higher power draw screen, when you go out of spec by using a flash cart that draws 2 to 3 times as much power as a regular cart, you are stressing that envelope and it just gives you problems. So to sum up the first 20 minutes of my video, or 40 minutes, I don't even remember what it was at this point. To sum up the earlier part, better batteries make a difference. That's all I got. The bigger the battery, the better, but unfortunately, we just simply cannot fit bigger batteries. A solution Nintendo could have gone with was keeping 4 batteries, but doing 4 AAA's instead of 4 AA's. Honestly, they had space constraints and that wouldn't have worked. If you look at where the cart slot is to do 4 AAA's, you'd have to line them up like that, which would have made the console a bit longer. And quite frankly, I'm a little bit glad that they didn't do that, but that would have been an option that solved that problem. Anyway, now is the part of the stream where I take questions. KJ Williams. But you won't know when they are low power, though, until it's too late, though, or am I still wrong? Fun fact. Jugi set out to solve that problem, and they have. I have not tested the most recent batteries. These are, like I mentioned way early in the stream, these are engineering samples. I have not tested their production ones. I promise it's on my list. In fact, I just remembered that I haven't even ordered them yet, but I'm gonna go do that after the stream. I'm gonna go order some production Jugis, just so I can confirm that they're just as good as the engineering samples, which are good, but the charger that came with these is awful. The production charger has allegedly been fixed. I haven't tested that, but I've been hurt. I have been told it is fixed, and I have no reason to believe the person who told me that lied, because why would they? Anyway, I'm sorry. I started explaining something and then didn't. So throughout the life of these Jugi batteries, they put out a solid constant 1.5 volts. When they are nearly depleted, that constant 1.5 volts gets dropped down to 1.1 volts instead of 1.5. So if you have a Game Boy that has a power LED, which this one does not, that one does, you would see that light go down. You do have to be paying attention to it, though, because it won't be a gradual, decrease in break. Ooh, that's a new one, isn't it? Oh, this thing is not happy, is it? Anyway, you do notice that power LED dimming, and I promise I will get to that more in a future video. I don't want to dwell on it too much because I don't want to take away from content from that video. But I did do time-lapse footage. I forgot my PIN on this phone. I can't unlock it, and it didn't take my fingerprint, apparently. But I did do time-lapse, and you can actually see the light getting dim on that thing. It's pretty cool. But that is... I currently have 10 volts batteries in this thing. 10 volts do not do that. There is no low power indication. They just, once they're dead, it's done. Off. But let me... See? Even after all that, we're still having problems. Like I said, it was a two-part solution. You can't just throw good batteries at the problem. You gotta replace the circuitry too. But just because we're gonna get it. We're gonna party extra hard tonight. Typhus says, I just got here. Can you start over? Yeah. Sure. Let's just start from the beginning. That'll be fine. No. There'll be a VOD up. Should be good. So yeah, honestly, I think Jugis are the best bet. 10 volts do work. Jugis are better. Alpha, when you explained P equals IV, you said that by using 2 higher voltage, then P gets way higher. I don't understand what you're trying to say, Alpha. I'm sorry. Am I gonna do a video on this Game Boy Pocket? Maybe. We'll see. Pretty neat though, isn't it? Alright, anyone got any other questions? Otherwise, I think I might call it an evening. Does anyone have any questions that aren't about this Game Boy? This particular Game Boy? So how viable would the Jugies be for other Game Boy models, or is that getting covered someplace else? So Dark Bowser, the Jugies are viable for other models, but as far as cost effectiveness goes, how far your money gets you in terms of battery life and just actual sheer utility, these are better for anything that takes AA's. But Jugies are still a good option. I find that the Jugi AA's in particular actually work real well with if you're into VR, they work real well with the VR controllers because these things run at a lower refresh rate on lower voltage batteries, but they run perfectly fine on Jugies. So if you want to use rechargeable batteries and you're into VR, they're really good for these. Otherwise, just about any other modern electronics that still take AA's are perfectly content with nickel metal hydrides. Like you could just throw some... I'd get better battery life with nickel metal hydrides, but I literally have the play and charge kit already because it was on clearance for a few bucks, so that's what I use. Okay. Yeah, if Game Boy has a clear shell, it's Game Boy Color only. That's definitely how that works. You can only play Game Boy Color games on what the hell? I don't have a single Game Boy Color game on my desk. Where am I okay, I found this. Whatever this is. Okay. Box Spirit, will Angry Helder's new voltage step up fix the problem of Pokemon saves being deleted? Box Spirit, I did touch on this briefly earlier in the stream. I don't know. It probably will, but I was referencing that design specifically when I mentioned that some of the new battery mods look to have potential issues with inrush current, and that is the one I was thinking of specifically. So it will probably solve that problem, but it might create another one for you. I don't know. I might test it out. I haven't decided yet. Probably not, but I'm not going to rule it out just yet. Potatoes. Would just an IPS funny playing screen with a lot of batteries work fine? If you're not using a flash cart, yeah, probably, but you might run into that save deleting issue that I referenced earlier. This specifically... Let me... Oh, why would I close the tab? Here, I would recommend reading through that, Potatoes, because you're liable to run into a similar problem, I think, by using LADAs without doing any extra mods. Ports, how many causes for power issues on the NDS Lite are you aware of? There's the classic fuses, faulty ribbons, L2, 4 inductors, but beyond that, there doesn't seem to be any fixes. What power-related issues are you referring to? Because I don't know of any. There are certain circumstances that can cause a DS Lite to not power up. Namely, the DS Lite power management IC is looking for the backlight in both of the screens, and if it does not detect that backlight, it will abort the power-up sequence. Of course, the fuses, but the fuses shouldn't blow unless there's another problem that you need to find and fix. And the inductors, to be honest, I don't mess with Game Boy lights that much, but I'd look, it depends on what specific problem you're experiencing, but if you have blown fuses, I would try and figure out what blew the fuse before trying to look at other things. Thing now, so a second power regulator isn't needed in the pocket if you have jugies. No, you should never. Okay, let's discuss that. That's actually a really good question, and it's something that I meant to go over but skipped in my outline. So I briefly touched on this in the video, but the stock DC-DC converter puts out 2 voltages. It puts out 5 volts for the system and then a 19 volt rail, negative 19 volt rail for the LCD itself. If you are using an IPS kit or one of those, little itty bitty TFT kits, if you're not using the stock LCD, you are not using that screen rail. In that particular case, replacing the voltage regulator entirely is a good option. If you are using the stock screen, you still need that negative 19 volts and you cannot replace this regulator. Additionally, the negative 19 volt rail is tied to the 5 volt rail, so if you were to take the load off of the 5 volts in this converter, if you were to take the load off that 5 volt rail, the screen will stop working because it will stop putting out the required power for the screen. So in that particular case, I just linked that Ben write-up. I recommend doing a similar thing where you put the 5 volt stock regulator, and this is referring to the original style backlights, not the total replacement like IPS backlights. Put the stock regulator, disconnect that from the Game Boy, and put the 5 volt rail on the backlight itself. That's the only thing the 5 volt rail on this thing's powering. The negative 19 volt rail is still running into the Game Boy, and then you use your second regulator to power the actual Game Boy. For anything else where you're just replacing the screen entirely, replace the regulator too, because there's no point in having 2 regulators at that point. You're just wasting efficiency. You're burning efficiency for the sake of convenience. It'll work, but not well. Okay, let me catch up again. Sorry, guys. Is there any difference between the Game Boy and Game Boy Color power delivery? I assume you mean Game Boy Pocket and Game Boy Color? Whatever. The original Game Boy and the Game Boy Pocket use just about the same power delivery. The circuitry itself is designed completely differently. They learned from the failures of the original Game Boy and redesigned it a little bit more efficiently and a little bit better in here. Fun fact, tangentially related. If you're using an IPS kit in an original Game Boy, there is a diode on some power supplies that you want to lift. Otherwise, you're going to run into problems. I should do a video on that with more detail, but if you join the Game Boy Discord and check the troubleshooting channel, there is a pinned comment with more detail on that specific problem. But long story short, because the 5 volt rail and the negative 19 volt rail for the screen, because those are linked together, when you stop drawing power from the negative 19 volt rail on the original DMG, it overloads and it could cause issues depending on your specific Game Boy. So that's a big difference between the Game Boy and the Game Boy Pocket. Game Boy Pocket mostly has that issue resolved. I'm not using the negative 19 volt rail in this thing, but it is still hooked up. I should have disconnected it, and that is one of the biggest reasons why there's no video on this thing yet. But I'm working on it. When this is done, I might work on a video. And then between Game Boy Pocket and Game Boy Color, 5 volt rail is the same, but the Game Boy Color has an extra screen rail. It has, I think it has a 13.3 volt and then a negative 15 volt rail. So it's the same thing, just with an extra voltage rail. You can swap a Game Boy Color regulator into a Game Boy Pocket as long as you're not using the screen rail. And you might have some luck, but same thing with the original Game Boy to the Game Boy Pocket. They improved the efficiency between generations, so you might have better luck if you're only using 5 volts, but if you need the stock screen to work, then you're going to have a bad time. Anyway, I hope that answers your question. I skipped a comment here. I skipped 2 comments here. So a second power regulator isn't needed in the Pocket if you have juvies. Never mind, I already covered that. But to sum up, you only use 2 regulators if you're using a stock screen. If you're not using a stock screen, just replace it entirely. KJ Williams, where do you get another power regulator? I'd check that Ben thread, that Ben link I sent. There's some good information in there. But long story short, Adafruit makes a good module. I think it's a little bit on the noisy side, but it does work. NCDC, will you be doing any further work on that power circuitry project you mentioned earlier? Did you mean this thing? The answer to that question is probably no. I touched on this earlier, and I mentioned power supply design it's an art, and it's one that I do not possess. At this point, I'm tempted to just commission something with certain features because just as a thought experiment, let's assume the 2 power regulators that are on the market that are designed specifically for a Game Boy Pocket. Let's assume those do exactly what they say they do and they work perfectly. They still don't have all the features that I want. So I want battery charging, I want battery indicators, I want soft latching power, and probably a few other things that I'm forgetting offhand. But, you know, if you're interested in taking a commission and you can actually design a pretty darn good power circuitry, and I would like a portfolio, by the way, I'm not just going to take any old application off the street, I'd be willing to commission that. But anyway, no, I'm probably not going to do more work on that. Sorry. I might build the ones I already have, and if it works well enough, I might publish it, but I know it's going to have issues because I have... Is this it? Yeah. Keeping things in Tupperware now. That circuit is this. I already lost it. Where'd it go? This thing, just one of the 4 power circuits on this power supply I designed. This power supply is for a Game Boy Advance, and it has a few separate power rails, but you can see works just fine when there's a game in it. There's currently not, though. I already know that this power supply has some issues, so even without building this one, I know that those issues are going to translate over because it's an identical circuit, just without the extra voltage rails. So yeah, it's a shame, but like I said, power supply design is an art, and unfortunately I'm not skilled in the arts. Typhus, my dude, I'm sorry, I totally missed that. I was trying to catch up on comments, but it looks like Mike got you already. I'm sorry about that. Thank you, though. Appreciate it. Samir, what do you think about EBL 1100 milliamp hour battery? Are those EBLs? Are those nickel metal hydride? I honestly haven't tried them, but if they're anything like the Ladas, they're unfortunately too low of a voltage to really be useful in here. There's a dude. Let me find him. I could have sworn I made a playlist. Oh, I did make a playlist. Let me find my playlist. Hang on. How do I link just the playlist? How do I do YouTube's? There we go. I made a playlist about batteries. If you've seen Project Farm before, you know exactly what you're in for. But if you haven't, this guy does a lot of testing, way more in depth than I do on batteries. And it's super fascinating, and if I recall correctly, he has tested EBLs, and he liked them, so... Okay. Thing now, what draws more power, the old backlight bivert combo or the new IPS screens? That depends on your implementation, to be honest, but more often than not, it's the IPS screens. There are instances where the old backlight bivert combo can draw more power, but that is pretty uncommon. I scrolled down too far. What happened? How many turns does the battery have to be? Looks like NCDC already got to that one, yes. Do you have anything that could tell how to put Game Boy Color into a pocket shell? No, I do not. Box Spirit says, oh, I have one more question. If we use a reprogram Pokemon Green English translation that doesn't use a save battery, would the save be safe on a pocket, do you think? So, that is a good question, and the answer depends entirely on how lucky you are. So a lot of those bootleg style games that do not use save batteries, how they work is there is a routine that runs on startup that will take the save from the internal flash of the game and copy it over to the SRAM, and then the game runs like normal. And then there's a save routine that when you actually save the game, the cart will then read the data off of the SRAM chip and then write it back to the flash chip. So what I mean by if you're lucky is it takes a higher voltage to write data than it does to read data. So if you are at the end of your life, end of your battery life, and your voltage is starting to sag down a little bit, not only will your write fail, but it can potentially blank out the chips. It can blank out the data on the chip. And you'll not only lose your save, but your game will no longer boot. So I don't recommend it. I don't recommend using those. But technically, yes, it could work. The difference being you have to actually be saving for it to fail, whereas the problem I linked and discussed with Ben Ven's write-up is the cart just has to be in your Game Boy for it to fail. Whereas with one of the like repro Pokemon Greens that you were mentioning, that issue will only happen when you're saving, but it's more likely to happen. If that makes sense. I hope that answers your question. Thanks guys for joining me, Draconic. Sorry I didn't get to say bye. I feel like I'm like 5 minutes behind on comments right now. Corey says, the screen on my backlit DMG sometimes freezes and burns out, which I'm worried about. Also on the kit I'm using when the batteries are low, palette presets get messed up. I can't say that I've seen that, but my first thought is that you should probably try some better batteries. I don't know what specific batteries you're using. You could also be experiencing that problem I alluded to with DMGs, where you have to lift a diode for it to work properly. I can't explain it in detail because I just don't know it offhand, but I recommend joining the Game Boy Discord, look in the troubleshooting channel, and check the pinned messages. It's in there, I promise. EK's channel, hey Mako, does IPS screens suffer from burn-ins like OLEDs? Kinda, but not really. No, nothing permanent at least. You might have some issues that can, like you might have some overdrive artifacts that'll stick around, especially it'll persist through reboots, but really what you need to do is just turn it off, wait for the capacitors to fully drain, turn it back on, and it'll be gone. there shouldn't be any burn-in with non-OLED screens. I mean, not to say it can't happen. LCDs can burn in. It's just very, very atypical. I've personally never had an OLED or a LCD burn in. Typhus, you're talking about this flash cart? I haven't. I'm trying to catch up on chat, but these are. You can probably guess where those are from just by looking at that logo on the back of that thing. I'll throw a link in chat in just a sec here. I'm guessing someone already got to it, but if not, it is right there. Dean, I appreciate the support. I'm glad I could help. I've said this before and I'll say it again, if I have helped at least one person, then I have done my job. So thank you, that means a lot. Thing now says, I read Judy's have an extremely limited number of charge cycles. Where did you read that, and how many charge cycles did it say? Because I haven't seen that. Now that could be because the specific ones that I have, all the documentation is in Chinese, so I just didn't read the documentation. But I will say I haven't had any problems with these ones. I have some earlier engineering samples that are a little bit rougher on the edges, and these give me nothing but problems. So these work great, but the charger sucks. These suck, but the charger works great. So needless to say, I used these ones with this one charger, and everything worked out for me. Oh, here's a good question. In relation to what I just mentioned, how about the FRAM modded carts? I was just talking about how the SRAM can get wiped out on some Game Boy Pockets. No, those are immune to that problem. You should not have the specific cause of the save getting wiped out on the SRAM carts, the ones with the battery. The problem is the Game Boy Pocket will start drawing off that internal save battery because the voltage sags so low on the main system bus. Yeah, it might still start drawing off of that battery in an FRAM modded cart like one of these, but it won't wipe the save. Worst case, you'll have to pop a new battery in there, but your save will still be intact. The only reason the save goes away is because the battery dies. A larger cart battery would not fix the problem because the problem is that the Game Boy is drawing off the battery. That should never happen in normal circumstances. Can you reflash any game, any cart with an existing game on it? No, you cannot. Existing normal games, like for example Pokemon Silver, uses what is called a ROM chip. Now, for those that don't know, ROM actually has a meaning, and it's not a little thing you download on some sketchy website so you can play emulators. ROM means read-only memory. Because it's read-only, you cannot rewrite it. That is why the term ROM is used. You cannot reflash any existing game. To reflash a game, you would have to swap out the ROM chip with a flash chip, something that you can flash, and then Bob Jonty. In the olden days, here it is. Ooh, shit. This is what flash carts used to look like. This is actually a 20-some-odd-year-old bootleg, and that is. We've come a long way. All right, this is what flash chips used to look like. To erase this, you have to expose that thing in the middle, that die. You have to expose that to light to wipe the data on it, and then you can flash this thing. I don't know the specific specs for this chip, but a lot of chips like this have to be flashed at like 12 volts, even though normal operation is only 5 volts. So we've come a long, long way. But fun fact, this is actually a single-sided board. Anyway, it also doesn't work. Probably not because it's been exposed to light, but who knows. It's certainly seen some shit. I have a feeling I'm going to get Pokemon to work on my pocket with using the Flash Cart, Angry Helder, Step Up Converter, and Elite Pros, and also for battery life, but I don't think I'm on track now. Lock Spirit, I think you are correct. I think if you were to replace the stock regulator in an IPS modded pocket with one of Helder's mods, as long as you're using high quality batteries, it should work. It is what it is. It should work. I think there's better solutions out there that have yet to come, but in the meantime, if you need to play on a pocket, I think that's the way to do it. Oh, there we go. Now, maybe just reading it, but the AliExpress listings for the Jugies say 500 cycles. Well, it says loops, but I assume that's what they meant. Yeah, 500 loops. That's a charge cycle. 500 cycles is actually pretty high. Most batteries are rated for 300. And if you think about it, that's literally once a day for a year. And most batteries are only rated to last a year, so I'd say 500 cycles is actually pretty high. I have gotten maybe 10. Oh no, I've done quite a few rundown tests. So I've gotten maybe 20 out of these, and I've had them probably 6 months. They're fine. Nowhere near the 500 they're apparently rated for. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if after 500 cycles or a year, whichever comes first, I wouldn't be surprised if you started to experience lower capacity, lower runtime. Silly question, what game is running on that pocket? I have 100% no idea. It is something that I just pulled out of my parts drawer. But if you look up this code on the back, you'll probably find out. It is CGB-BKVJ-JPN. If you look that up quote for quote, you'll find it in a database somewhere. Ooh, God dang it. To test it, you do need to solder the wire to the power button. Yes. BKVK? BQ. Yeah, that's what I meant. Shut up. That's why I showed the thing on camera. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not familiar with Shaman King, if that's what it is. Here, you know what? You know what, Alpha? CGB-BQVJ. Oh, fuck, I'm not even typing. Let's try that again. BQVJ-JPN. There. Every single officially licensed Nintendo Game Boy game has one of those codes on it in English, and you can use that to search, unless your game is missing the label, but this isn't officially licensed, so it doesn't count anyway. Every single thing that plugs into a Game Boy. Apparently, except for the e-reader. That was a bad example. Oh, wait, no, it's right there. It just has a different code. AGB 14. Boom! Korokoro Kirby. CGB. KKKJ. There's JPN. That's an unfortunate combo, but there you go. Whatever the hell this is. I don't know, it's got a bird, it's got some chick with a ponytail, some Dragon Ball looking fuck, and then some chicken and witch hat. CGB BD3J JPN. We got this wonderful hamster game. DMG-B7HJ JPN. Tamagotchi. There's stickers over it, but it's right there. DMG-ATAJ-JPN. Anyway, every game has it. Also, fun fact, if for some reason your game is missing its case, that code is on the ROM chip as well. DMG AR4E? Yeah, AR4E. I was trying to look at it through the stream. Every single game. Oh, wait, no. There's an exception. Tetris. Some Tetris cards don't have it. There's an exception for every rule, isn't there? But look at that. Keeps going. Anyway, I'm done with that. What else we got? I think that's it. Alright, folks. I think I'm gonna have to call it an evening. Yeah, those Tetris cards. Technically, it's an exception. I said every game has it on the ROM chip. Tetris. Those are, some of them are covered in epoxy. That is actually by design. There are also a few other games. The Hong Kong. Shoot, what are they called? They're the 4-in-1 games. I don't know. Those have epoxy blobs in them too. So, David, I don't know if you were here for this part of the stream, but I showed you how to calculate wattage. So a lithium-ion battery, 900 milliamp hour, assuming it's actually 900 milliamp hours, would be about 3.33 watts of power. Whereas, for example, let's take two IKEA Lattes, 900 milliamp hours at collective 2.4 volts nominal. 2.16. So, assuming you have to do zero conversion, which I'm pretty sure you don't have to. I've always just plugged lithium ion straight into Game Boy Pocket. Can't say I recommend it, but it does work, and it would give you better battery life. Are you talking shit about my TI-86? Fine, I'll use the TI-108. 108's better, right? That's a higher number. 0.9 times 1.7, 2.22. Whatever, dude. TI-86, best graphing calculator ever made. Especially because they're like $10 on eBay. Especially because they're like $10 on eBay. I wish I could say I've had this calculator since high school, but I actually ruined my high school TI-86 trying to backlight it. So I bought another one recently. Anyway, I think it's time to end the stream. I appreciate you guys sticking around. I hope that made sense. I'm sure I said something that just was absolute bullshit at some point, and I apologize. It wasn't intentional. But no one called me out on it so far, so it might be good. And I especially appreciate the two people who threw me a donation. That was completely unnecessary and very kind of you. Thank you again, Papa and Typhus. And catch y'all next time. Peace!